Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Perriard. I'm the co-CEO of Earth Action. We are a research consultancy based in Switzerland. So first, I want to welcome you to this webinar at the occasion of the launch of the report, Moving Towards Outcome-Based Financial Mechanisms for Waste Prevention. So the treaty in negotiation is set to unlock billions of dollars, and how this funding is spent will be decisive in how effective action on plastic pollution will be. So that's why we're here today, to explore the innovative financial mechanisms that outcome-based waste prevention is. So I'll start by sharing with you some key findings of the report. And this is the report that was launched about a week ago. And then we'll have the honor of welcoming 6 additional speakers who will share how, from their perspective and from where they sit, outcome-based financing has the opportunity of redefining how we approach and finance waste prevention for a future that is free of plastic pollution. So this webinar is being recorded. The link will be shared after with all of the people who have registered for the webinar today. There is a Q&A box where you can actually drop your questions. This will not be shared broadly, but at least we will be able to collect those questions. If we have a chance to, we'll try and address 1 or 2 questions toward the end. But we are many today, and thank you so much for this interest. We have a lot of people joining, so we want to set the expectations that we might definitely not have a chance to address so many of them. What we will do, though, is that after the session, we'll try and answer all of those questions and get back to you or share documents where we are able to engage more. So let's start with setting the scene on plastic pollution. The challenge of plastic pollution is massive. Currently, out of 430 million tons that are produced annually, 110 are mismanaged, and 28 million tons are leaking in the environment. Under a business as usual scenario, those numbers are set to increase by more than 75% by 2040. Now, the growth of plastic pollution is also far outpacing our capacity to manage waste. And in the past 10 years, plastic production has actually grown 20 times more rapidly than the capacity to keep this plastic in a circular loop. So the longer we wait, and the more severe the impact, right? And we can see that delaying action by just 5 years would cause the additional leakage of more than 80 million tons of plastic in nature. So looking at the solutions, put very simply, addressing this crisis requires 2 levers: the reduction of volumes of plastic waste that is created, and the increase of the capacity to treat that plastic waste. And by aligning policies with innovative financing, we can unlock the necessary capital to support the scalable solutions across the whole plastic life cycle. So on the policy side, there are 15 global rules that the treaty has an opportunity of enforcing. And that would allow a system change that in turn would allow to reduce mismanaged waste by up to 90%. Alongside policies, investments are needed in order to work on waste reduction and on waste management. So there are 3 main obstacles that stand in our way. First, that's the funding gap. And we've seen 5.2 trillion need to be invested in order to reduce mismanaged waste by 90%. A large part of the investments are needed in upstream interventions, so basically on reducing the creation of waste. Second, the early stage nature of the solution is an obstacle, because many solutions are still low on the investment readiness index, which makes it hard for those projects to actually raise the necessary capital. And third obstacle, It's the disconnection that there is between technical assistance and financial resources, because the capacity building and securing financing actually go hand in hand, and that creates a chicken and egg situation, because the solutions to move up in the solution lifecycle and achieve this investment readiness, they require assistance, and that includes both financial backing, but also technical capacity enhancements. However, actually, securing finance often hinges on the already established ability to scale, and it needs to demonstrate both the technical capacity and the operational readiness. So that's this chicken and egg. So addressing those challenges is critical. And this calls for innovative financial mechanisms. And the solution must include a shift towards outcome-based financing, leveraging investments that then directly contribute to measurable waste reduction. So that's in this setup that outcome-based waste prevention holds this immense potential in plastic pollution mitigation, because it secures financial incentives to reward initiatives and projects that demonstrate a measurable reduction in plastic waste, and that drives efficiency and impact. And solutions that have a high impact return on investments, sometimes they have no or negligible direct financial return on investments. But in other sectors, outcome-based financing has already been successfully implemented in different forms. And so we'll have three examples here. One is on biodiversity and ecosystem restoration. So payments there are linked to effective management of specific protected areas and wildlife reserves, on also specific conservation and restoration outcomes. And typically the coming protocol on biodiversity actually references outcome-based financing directly, so as payment for ecosystem services. On sustainable agriculture, payments are made based on verified improvements of soil quality or reduced pesticide use, on increased yields through sustainable method. And a third example on the social side, women's education, in which payments are tied to meeting specific educational outcomes. For example, increased enrollments, improving the learning outcomes, etc. So those are successful and they're existing. And that's a concept that now can be extended to waste and to plastic pollution. So now when we talk about measurable waste reduction, that calls for a robust evaluation framework, because it's essential to ensure that interventions actually contribute meaningfully to waste prevention. So this evaluation framework is set around three sections. The first is the interventions need to be measured based on a clear taxonomy that includes where in the plastic life cycle the intervention stands. Second, they need to be measured based on a set of metrics. And plastic leakage is our reference metric, and it allows to measure how effective the intervention is at avoiding plastic pollution. And then third, we look at what indirect efforts affects both in terms of potential co-benefits and trade-offs the intervention holds. So that's a start of an evaluation framework that can be used and that can be further developed and enforced. Now, there are key enablers that are needed in order for outcome-based financing to become a reality for waste prevention. And that includes private sector, development finance institutions, policymakers, regulatory support, and the upcoming treaty. So will each of them play a critical role, and we'll have a bit of a zoom on a few of them. First, starting with the private sector. So the private sector faces large challenges or let's say dilemmas today. When there's no infrastructure in a place, either they decide not to operate in that market, or they accept to be responsible for some level of plastic pollution, and with basically limited ways to engage for action outside of their direct control. Now, if we look at climate, companies, they know today that they need to align their carbon emissions with the treaty, with the Paris Agreement, meaning with emissions that lead to 1.5 degree of warming. For plastic, targets don't exist yet. The treaty will set what this global target is, and then that will cascade into national plans, and that can also translate into corporate targets. This is one of the missions, actually, of the Plastic Footprint Network, which published the methodology for corporate plastic footprint assessment last year, and which is now on a mission to develop a framework for target setting and mitigation. So a key focus will be the ways that companies are expected to mitigate their impacts through actions both within and outside of their value chain. And so actions outside of the value chain, it doesn't mean cleanup activities. It means primarily supporting infrastructure for circularity. And it's about giving the opportunity for corporations to invest into solutions through, for example, outcome-based financing as part of their mitigation journey, and to complement the existing contribution, for example, to EPR. So the first step always has to be reduction within their value chain of their own footprint or leakage, which goes through the reduction of plastic usage and also changes in business model. And that's what we have typically in the step one. And then companies, they can also support actions outside of their value chain. For example, by supporting the avoidance of their waste, but also others' waste. For example, in supporting the development of reuse infrastructure and models that will not benefit them alone, but also others. And that's the step number two. And finally, efforts should also go in supporting the management of waste when it's created, such as collection and recycling infrastructure, as well as addressing legacy pollution. And that's step three. And essentially, this is on step two and step three that outcome-based waste prevention stands as a possibility and a solution. So now, while we can hope that corporate action will happen by itself, we also know pragmatically that there's a layer of policy and enforcement that is needed, and that brings us to the role of policymakers and regulators. So EPR is one of the instruments that comes to mind, right, where policymakers and regulators need to enforce regulations allowing the corporate responsibility. But other instruments where policymakers' action is required is ensuring alignment of the companies that operate in their territory to contribute to the development of circular models and interventions that prevent waste and pollutions. So we essentially would like corporate stewardship to feed into national action plans, and that's where we should look at the opportunity to integrate outcome-based financing into those national plans and policies. And finally, the treaty. So if there are three asks that we would have for negotiators of the plastic treaty, the first one would be on recognizing outcome-based financing and payment by result waste prevention programs as innovative financial schemes. The second is to stimulate different forms of innovative financial schemes with strong environmental and social safeguards, of course, to enhance the pace, effectiveness, and the scale of resource mobilization and use. And the third one is leveraging outcome-based financing to unlock more financial resources, both from public and private sources, towards capacity building. So those are things that we will hopefully have a chance to discuss further in Ottawa in about a month. And before opening the roundtable, so I'd like to share just a few words about some of the work from the speakers that we are blessed to have today with us, because that's when it becomes concrete, right? That's those real-world examples that show how financial instruments can be aligned with the instrument environmental outcomes that we are seeking. So we have Laura Thompson today with us from Green Blue. She will tell us more about the recycled material standards and the ARC. We have Svetlana de Costas from Repurpose Global, which will also highlight examples of how outcome-based financing can be used for local waste management. We have Tao Wang from the World Bank, who just launched a 100 million 7-year plastic waste reduction linked bond, and that uses the Vera plastic waste reduction standard. And then we have 3 examples for waste prevention through reuse with Upstream, Repurpose and their Reuse Outcome Fund, and NBU. So without further ado, we'll get started with this roundtable. And thank you again for joining us today on this webinar. I'll have the first question for you, Laura. So Greenblue has been pivotal in developing the recycled material standard and introducing a novel outcome-based finance mechanisms that is based on what you call the attributes for recycled content, ARCs. So can you please discuss the genesis of these initiatives, also the impact that you see on recycling practices, and how ARC, as a form of outcome-based financial mechanisms for waste prevention, can be further leveraged to enhance this post-consumer recycled feedstock that is so needed in the circular economy we're trying to create?
Sure. So thanks for having us here. I think your first question was related to the genesis of the program. So at Greenblue, we are a sustainable materials management organization, an environmental nonprofit. And we started the development of the recycled materials standard really to develop a traditional chain of custody program, if you will, introducing controlled blending claims and mass balance claims. And in the development of that standard, it was proposed by members of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition that we consider using sort of an environmental commodity approach, or a book and claim approach, if you will, in ISO terms, to look at other solutions for recycled materials. So we took that advice as we were developing our standard. We had the assistance of a standard development organization, NSF International, and they really walked us through the multi-stakeholder process, using ISEAL guidance to really work through how to develop this standard using best practices. So really all along it was meant to be a robust standard with all the right criteria in it for transparency and traceability of materials. And this concept of using what we're now referring to as an outcome-based finance mechanism really came from stakeholders themselves. It was not our original conception for the program, but it was such a good idea. We felt compelled to follow up on it. The advisory committee was right behind it. So we used all those traditional steps through committee, multi-stakeholder committee, and then of course public comment phases with putting the standard out in the public comment. So that's a few words on the genesis. As you mentioned in the introduction, our impact is focused on the recycling action. So the outcome is truly measured in tons of recycled material produced by resin type. We do account for losses in the process. So every ARC represents that action of 1 metric ton of recycled material that it was actually produced. Our key objective really there was multiple objectives, but really trying to complement, as you said, EPR programs. A lot of EPR programs are very focused on collection and sortation and financing those steps in the supply chain. And we saw a real opportunity to help the next step down the supply chain, that once those materials hopefully are prevented in the first place to the extent possible, but collected, sorted, and now need to move through the supply chain to enable that further circularity, we wanted to support that step in the supply chain. So some of the criteria to enable creating an ARC, the attribute of recycled content, we are looking to expand capacity beyond business as usual. So capacity expansion is one criteria. And also technical improvements are a trigger or a test for additionality. We have a massive gap in the availability of, say, food grade materials. So that's another type of criteria to really address both capacity and the quality of recycled materials. So those were two of our key objectives, using that theory of change to help that part of the supply chain. In terms of, you had asked us to speak really quickly around some of the challenges and successes. I think one of the challenges we face, frankly, is people understanding this concept. The recyclers really see the benefit that this can bring them new finance streams, and they are eager to adopt this and to issue these credits or these ARCs. And but the rest of the stakeholders are still grappling with what is this and how can I use this. So in terms of successes, seeing webinars like this to help educate stakeholders is really pivotal for us. And so that's one of the reasons we're thrilled to be here. It helps build the credibility for these programs, build education around it, and really just help socialize these really important concepts. I guess another recent success that we saw as a key milestone in North America was the recognition of the U.S. Plastics Pact, where they said they developed some certification principles and actually recognized this type of trading scheme within the U.S. principles for activators meeting their commitments. So that was a real win for us, and that just came out a couple of months ago, their recognition of this system. So we are thrilled to be here. This is super important. Really happy that you have fostered this dialogue, and appreciate being here to talk about our system.
Thanks so much, Laura. And hopefully we'll definitely be able to build on the ARC concept for the corporate accountability framework that is currently in development within the Plastic Footprint Network, because recycled content is definitely one of the ways that the corporate world is able to contribute to the building of circular economy. Thanks so much. Svetlana, I'd like to ask you the next question. So Repurpose Global has been at the forefront of implementing these innovative solutions to combat plastic pollution, initially in developing local waste management, and now for waste reduction also through the reuse outcome funds that you recently launched. Can you please share a bit more about those initiatives and also how you have leveraged the concept of outcome-based financial mechanisms to drive them?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's so wonderful to be a part of this conversation. For those of you who aren't familiar, I'm Svetlana, and I lead strategic partnerships and ecosystem engagement at Repurpose Global. So we are a circularity action platform, and we're really focused on building inclusive and scalable circularity and waste management infrastructure in some of the world's most underserved communities. And from our early days as an organization, we realized that tackling the plastic waste crisis meant more than just cleanup efforts, right? It required innovative solutions backed by substantial financing. And we consistently observed two key trends. The first was that waste as an issue wasn't really getting enough attention that it needed, which meant that there were very few waste-related solutions that were operational on the ground. And the second was that the solutions that did exist on the ground and who were making headway had real issues scaling it up because there was a severe lack of technical assistance and financial support. And that's where, for us, outcomes-based financing became really crucial, because we were able to now use this mechanism to channel a lot of finance from the private sector, as well as the development finance institutions, towards these local grassroots solutions on the ground. And it allowed us to scale waste management infrastructure, I would say, pretty rapidly in places where we thought it was previously impossible to do so. So you asked about how did we deploy this, right, in terms of local waste management. And if I had to summarize this, I could summarize it in a 4-step process. The first would be conducting those baseline assessments, because that's really important to understand the initial volume of plastic waste, recovery, and recycling in a given region or process. The second is really about building partnerships with local grassroots solutions and innovators on the ground to enhance those waste management capacities and help them generate tangible results and outcomes. And the third step is really about designing these solutions and deploying them on the ground in a way and format that maximizes really the waste recovery and recycling rates and outcomes per dollar invested. And the fourth is a continuous due diligence process, where through our digital traceability platforms, we ensure that the environmental outcome generated, which in this case is the additional tonnage of waste collected and ethically recycled, is properly audited, it's documented, and it serves as a basis for the local innovators to then access that further on financing. So through this model, we've been able to really scale up waste management systems in 8 countries now, and we've been able to prevent over 50 million pounds of additional low-value plastics from leaking into our water bodies or entering our landfills. And I think the other benefit is really that we've been able to provide access to waste management to over 1 million people in the Global South for the very first time, and helped supported the livelihoods of over 2,000 waste workers globally. And so, we're really encouraged by the success of building local waste management through this outcomes-based financing mentality. And we really believe in the power of scaling this up, right? So now, as you said, Sarah, we're working to test if the same mechanism can be leveraged to scale reuse and refill initiatives through our newly launched, and might add, very exciting, Reuse Outcomes Fund. So some of you might have got the news that this is a $1 million prototype fund that we're aiming to use to scale reuse and refill initiatives, particularly in low and middle income communities. And we're targeting really how to embed reuse systems into plastic intensive sectors like food and grocery or personal care or e-commerce. And to start off with, we'll be focusing on 3 geographies. This is going to be in the United States, Canada, as well as India. And I think the reason why we conceptualized this fund is because the science is pretty clear that we need to scale reuse systems. We need those reuse mechanisms to drive that significant waste prevention that we're all hoping for. However, the reuse movement faces systemic barriers, such as very prohibitively high setup costs, right? As we all know, there's this green premium associated with reuse and refill systems in the current stage that often discourages that early adoption. And many reuse and refill innovators, similar to the waste management innovators that I spoke of earlier, are also in their very early stages, and they lack those necessary track records or technological maturity, really, to be able to attract the financing that is needed to scale up. And lastly, I think I've spoken to so many reuse and refill innovators, and all of them mentioned that the current traditional financial mechanisms like debt or venture capital are just not fit for purpose given the complexities of reuse systems. And so through this Reuse Outcomes Fund, we at Repurpose are trying to see whether we are able to finance these reuse solutions solely based on, again, measuring the environmental outcome, which in this case would be kilograms or tonnage of plastic avoided through that reuse intervention. And in this way, hope to prioritize impact return over that financial return on investment. And I think when we were conceptualizing this, we were very cognizant of the critique that reuse efforts have often been seen as exclusive to economically wealthier populations. And so through this fund, we're hoping to help address that. We're hoping to help democratize access to reuse solutions so that no one is left behind really in the transition to a just circular economy. So I think in conclusion, I've got to say that while we're doing everything we can and putting all that we've got into this fight against plastic pollution, we really can't do this alone. And I strongly believe in the power of collaboration and leveraging insights from ecosystem stakeholders and experts like you all to really able to make this difference. So if there's something on your mind from today's session, a suggestion, a critique, or an idea that has sparked you after reading this report, this wonderful report that EA has put out, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and to me directly with your feedback, because we would really love to build this the right way and scale the movement in the right way. And really thankful again for the opportunity for Repurpose to be able to support this report by Earth Action, as well as connect with such key players in the value chain from upstream, from Green Blue to our colleagues here at World Bank. So yeah, let's keep this conversation going and turn today's discussions into really actions and outcomes that we can all be proud of. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Svetlana. And that's a great introduction to the next intervention from you, Julie, from upstream. So Upstream actually focuses on normalizing reuse, on supporting the reuse industry broadly. So I'd love to have your perspective on how outcome-based financing can accelerate this transition to circular economy.
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. On behalf of our upstream team, we're working remotely across the US. We appreciate this opportunity, not just to contribute to the report, but also to participate in today's event. And like Svetlana, hoping this is the beginning of many conversations and collaborations. So from our lens, we're all reuse all day long. And obviously we're looking for many more funding streams to build out reuse infrastructure. And by reuse infrastructure, we're looking at the collection, sorting, wash hubs, redistribution facilities that can provide the infrastructure for reusable packaging. It could be adapted MRFs, it could be new facilities, et cetera. We're looking at all of those opportunities. And we certainly know that investors are poised and want to not only see an ROI, but an impact on their investment. And like Svetlana said, we can show that impact through the outcomes that we know will come from solutions like reuse. I want to talk a little bit about the financial challenges we're seeing, economic opportunities reuse offers, and then specifically upstream's role, some real world examples like Sarah was mentioning that we're here to share as far as creating demand for outcomes-based financing and also some new mechanisms we're exploring with our partners. So first of all, financial challenges for the reuse innovators and reuse innovators. I'm speaking of those who recover, wash, and redistribute reusable packaging. As we all know, reusable packaging has been around almost since the entirety of human existence, but reuse as a business model is new. So that's where the risk assessment comes in. And so investors are nervous about it because it's new. The other challenge is because we know for reuse to realize its economic and environmental benefits, we know that volume is essential. But obviously, when you're starting in a new industry, it's often small pilots that aren't necessarily baked in tried and true best practices. So we've got a scaling challenge there, chicken and egg problem. We also know the status quo system does not reward what we're hoping for. This is common for the whole paper's theme here, but basically what is incentivized right now is short-term thinking, fast ROI, and capital efficiency. We need to start thinking like the solar industry has caused people to start thinking with initial high investment on the front end and environmental and economic payback over time. So shifting that thinking, borrowing from the success of the solar industry. But unlike solar, I do want to say reuse has not been incentivized widely yet through policy and regulations, as we all know. We're working toward that. And waste recovery and recycling already have well-defined outcomes-based financing, but reuse and reduction do not yet. So we're hoping these conversations and collaborations really lead to that. As far as the promise for reuse, we obviously know the status quo is not sustainable from a human environmental standpoint, but what is less understood is that it would be a huge missed economic opportunity to not scale reuse. So from the environmental standpoint, EMF has pointed out that meeting the UN climate goals will help us reach 55% with renewable energy. But 45% we still need to target to meet UN climate goals. And that's how we make, consume, and dispose of the goods that we buy. And we also know that from an environmental standpoint, corporations are reaching out to us personally because they're trying to meet their scope 3 emissions and they need help. They want to figure out reuse. Again, many are just trying small pilots, but we need them to scale and move to projects. From the economic standpoint, EMF has also pointed out that if just 20% of plastic packaging moves to reusable formats, you're looking at a $10 billion opportunity right there. Solar is now a $200 billion industry. Folks said it wouldn't work, and it's on pace to be a $600 billion industry by 2030. So again, the economic opportunities are huge. It would be a huge missed opportunity not to build and scale reuse systems. And we talk about payment over time, ROI, and reuse systems. We're not talking decades. We're talking 5 to 6 years. So it's not extraordinarily long payoff points. As far as upstream's work, we are a lead change agency for reuse, for the reuse movement in US and Canada. We are hyper-focused on reaching tipping points, so reuse becomes, oh, did I freeze? Can you guys still hear me? Okay. Where reuse becomes widespread, cross-sectional, interoperable, and an everyday utility. And just like Svetlana said, we want to democratize reuse systems. It needs to be accessible and not a boutique solution for sure. I want to talk a little about the 3 strategies Sarah introduced you to about us. We are normalizing reuse, growing and supporting reuse systems, and creating enabling policy environment for reuse. The second one, growing and supporting reuse systems, is really germane to this conversation, and a couple of ways that we are putting strategies in place to realize the growing and supporting of reuse systems. We are learning from our colleagues in Europe and working on developing a reuse industry alliance, borrowing a page as well from the solar industry. We're working with Reloop on that so that members can speak with one voice to support reuse policy. They can secure large contracts and adopt standards, among other things. Upstream's role in that is baking out the membership benefits. So more to come on that. As far as financial levers specifically, one tact we're taking is targeting and working with what we call transformational partners, which are the companies that have the scale, buying power, and influence to transform entire sectors. And specifically within that, we're targeting groups that own and control large-scale venues that have the volume to incentivize the build-out of reuse infrastructure. And what we found on the ground from our team's work in Durham is that if a stadium agrees to go to reusable, that reuse service provider providing the sorting, collection, redistribution, sometimes reusable packaging itself to that large-scale venue can take a forward-facing service agreement and contract, bring it to the bank and say, okay, I need money now to build out this reuse infrastructure. Once those wash hubs are in place, they can now service the entire region. And what we're talking about is, again, interoperable systems. So it won't matter. Initially, it might be just food and beverage to service that stadium, but it could be shampoo and conditioner bottles. It doesn't matter. And again, this is borne out based on what we've experienced here. The other thing is green bonds. As far as we know in North America, green bonds have not been used yet to unlock funding for reuse infrastructure. We are partnering with the Government Finance Officers Association to build out a best practices green bond to help build out reuse infrastructure. 2 more quick things. We are involved with setting reuse refill targets in state level EPR and bottle deposit bills, and also working with states to embed climate action plans with reuse infrastructure. And then lastly, a shout out. I was on the call the other day with one of our reuse service providers, Bold Reuse, and they were successful in getting a grant from the state of Arizona Department of Environmental Quality's new program that's giving them enough money to build out reuse infrastructure in Phoenix. So now they're going to be able to service the city of Phoenix. So more of all of this, and we welcome collaborations and conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie, and thanks for sharing this latest success. We definitely hope for many more coming fast, but thanks so much for sharing your insights. And staying in the reuse discussion, we also have Eline, who has a very specific perspective to share also from the Global South. So Eline, you're the head of the Zero Waste Living Lab program in Indonesia, and you're essentially scaling reuse and refill models. So I'd love you to tell us more about what is preventing the scale up of waste prevention business models in the Global South context, and from your perspective in Indonesia, and also the role that you see outcome-based financing that could play actually in overcoming those current challenges.
Yes, thanks so much, Sarah, for this introduction and the question. And I'm happy to see that there's also been already some questions in the Q&A on the sachets culture and the Global South. So I will address all of those. But let me start by setting the scene actually about what is happening in the Global South. Because we see that especially the Global South markets have been overflown with new types of non-recyclable plastics over the last 2 decades, not even that long. With the main issue being those sachets that were already named in the chat and other flexibles. And the distribution of these plastics is it's phenomenal here in the Global South, including Indonesia, where I'm based. You will find these everywhere on every remote island, and all these will end up in the environment as the waste management system is simply not present. So at best, they end up in poorly managed landfills, but usually they get burned in the open air by individuals or thrown into rivers. And especially the Global South with these practices thereby bears the cost of dealing with plastic waste. According to a WWF report, these costs of dealing with plastic waste are 10 times higher in developing countries compared to the global norm. So that is why we as NVU started focusing on solutions to prevent this, because the leakage of single-use plastics is just so high in the global south. So we believe that upstream actions need to be prioritized, and we started to implement them with the main thought of like when the bathtub is like literally overflowing majorly, your first instinct is to turn off the tap. So yeah, that is what we do by introducing reuse and refill models here in Indonesia and beyond that tackle plastic solutions right at its source. Yeah, and you asked about what is currently preventing us from scaling up from a finance point of view. So we have a top three. The first one is actually, yeah, that we hear a lot. There's no scale yet. There's no investment readiness. There's a lot of skepticism towards valuation, the return on investment, and yeah, the scalability. And this was indeed also already mentioned in the report, right? So this is a chicken and egg problem because investments are needed to reach scale. So that's the first one. So second is actually that we usually feel like we actually ask for small ticket sizes. So I think somewhere it was mentioned there's a lot of investment costs, but actually, especially perhaps here in the global south, there's a lot of operational costs involved actually, and they're not huge. So actually, we also see that as an opportunity to even focus more on these in the global south. But usually what we hear that is rather difficult actually for investors because then they have a lot of administrative and portfolio management costs with like only ticket sizes of up to like $1 million. That's nothing for them. But yeah, that's what we currently require. And the third one is that we usually hear there's no business case yet, but that's because it's super hard to compete with the very cheap single-use plastics packaging supply chain. But there's a big but here, because our venture Allner has already overcome this actually. So Allner is already creating revenue with a returnable packaging system. So this, yeah, it really shows that single-use plastics, if they would have their true price, reuse systems will definitely outperform those, because the truth is we're actually subsidizing all those single-use plastics. There is no level playing field. So if we can already make revenue now, then for sure, if there's the right incentives, we can actually very easily scale up reuse systems. So then finally, how can outcome-based finance bridge the gap here? So from our perspective, there are two main ways. So first of all, it's balancing the investments on their outcomes, right, which is basically says. So not only including the environmental effects actually, but also additional effects like social impacts. Because that's also a big benefit that we create with the communities we work with. So our resellers in our returnable packaging system, they also gain from the system by capturing margin. And on average, they can actually increase their income by 10 to 15% by reselling and also collecting our returnable containers. And this also helps us because this also optimizes our logistics, saving costs and emissions. So that's the first one. And secondly, it can also really help balancing investments on where they are needed most, like I said in the beginning, the global south in our perspective, because investments in plastic collection and recycling, they have been almost completely gone into the developed world over the past decades and not into economies where they are needed most in the global south. And I really feel like this framework and outcome-based financing can turn the tide on this trend by prioritizing the global south context for these investments in upstream solutions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Line, for sharing that. Also, it's actually really great to see that this is a system that works not only with premium in highly developed economies, but actually that you have a lot of success scaling that up already and more to come. Thanks so much for sharing that. Tao, your turn. I have a lot of questions, and I know that many people have around the 100 million outcome bonds that the World Bank recently issued. It's not the first bond of that kind that the World Bank launches, but it's the first that will tackle plastic pollution. And the World Bank has a lot of experience with result-based financing. So we'd love to hear more from you about how you approach outcome-based financing and how you're now using it for addressing plastic pollution.
Certainly. Thank you, Sarah. And hi, everyone. I'm Tao Wang from the World Bank. I would like to first give you a quick overview of this recently issued outcome-based plastic bond. And then I will share with you some of the reflections on the outcome-based financing instrument. So last January, 2 months ago, the World Bank issued a plastic waste reduction linked bond. It's a 7-year bond with $100 million principal. And this innovative bond provides investors with a finance return linked to plastic credits and carbon credits, both using the Vera standard, expected to be generated by 2 projects in Ghana and Indonesia. Through this transaction, the bond investors contributed part of their coupon payment, which were converted into $40 million out of this $100 million bond as an upfront financing to the project. So the project can really increase their capacity, expand new collection recycling sites, and install food-grade recycling equipment. So undertake these activities to really scale up their investment on plastic reduction. Now, this transaction, I would say at least is a win-win-win scenario. First, I think the bond investors, they are happy to see that their investment are, making ESG impact, environmental, social, and governance impact within their risk return profile. And second win is the project developers, private sector companies, they can overcome the barriers of upfront financing through this innovative financing instrument, and then are able to scale up their investment, generate the outcomes, and then in return, receive financial revenue, and then also part of that repay back to the investors. And then as the World Bank, this is the third wing, as a development institution, we are also very happy to support this kind of transaction so that generates really the desired development outcomes. In this case, it's the verified climate mitigation outcomes, the carbon emission reductions, and also plastic reduction and circularity, right? So this is a snapshot of this plastic outcome-based bond. Let me now share with you 3 points as a reflection. The first point is outcome-based financing has been a proven and effective tool in driving for results and impacts. It also enhances monitoring, reporting, and verification, and catalyzing investments, not only in plastic reduction, but also more broadly in development outcome and sustainable development impacts. I can give you a couple examples. As Sarah mentioned, although this is the first ever plastic reduction linked outcome bond that the World Bank issued. However, such an approach has been already applied in many different areas. In 2022, the World Bank issued a bond called Rhino Bond that targets the rhino biodiversity conservation in South Africa. And in 2023, the World Bank also issued a bond called Emission Reduction Linked Bond in Vietnam, targeting at the purified water, investment to reduce carbon emissions. And more broadly, the outcome-based financing also, has been operational in the carbon market for almost 2 decades. In fact, the World Bank launched the first ever prototype carbon fund, the first carbon fund, also use outcome-based financing to drive results in climate mitigation. So the point here is outcome-based financing is not something new. It has been proven. So we really hope we can support that, and also seeing, this is one of the mechanisms that can be adopted to drive results in the context of this plastic treaty discussion as well. So this is my first point. Second point is, for outcome-based financing to work effectively and serve its intended purpose, we need three things: robust governance, two, robust measuring, reporting, verification. So it generates high integrity and sound result. And then number three is really awareness raising, capacity building, technical systems, because the project developers, in some cases, communities, vulnerable population, they need support, technical and financing to make it work. And then point number three is it calls for partnership and collaboration, because for this to work, private sector will need to come in, regulators need to set up the policy enabling environment, standard setting organization need to also establish the methodology, the standard in a right way. And then the investors, brokers, everyone has an essential role to play. And going back to this plastic outcome-based bond, from the World Bank point of view, we want to see more of these projects, activities can benefit from this innovative financing instrument. So moving forward, we wanted to also see whether we can support some activities more upstream. Yeah, I heard Julie talk about these very interesting activities. Happy to follow up offline, and also many other audience in this conference, whether we can really do something more impactful upstream, but also we wanted to focus least developed countries and the small island developing states to really bring the financing, bring the support to those who are in most need of the money and the technical support. Now, let me perhaps conclude by announcing two things very quickly. One is we have been undertaking a study on plastic crediting in partnership with South Pole, and we will launch a report at the margin of the INC4 next month in Canada. So the report lays out the state and trend of this instrument, the risk and the opportunities. We are also organize a side event at INC4 focused on outcome-based financing to address plastic pollution. So I will share with Sarah and others this invitation so that you are very welcome to join us. So last but not least, really look forward to follow up and collaborate in this very much needed space. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Tao. And that's how the collaboration comes in all together. I think those opportunities are really coming well together during times like that. And Pak Joko, thank you so much for being with us. You have heard a lot of different solutions being shared. I think you have a very unique perspective from the Indonesian government. So we'd love to hear from you as a last panelist, how outcome-based finance mechanisms can be leveraged to increase the scale and also the pace of financing and resources mobilization, especially in developing countries, with the example of Indonesia.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Let me introduce through the presentation, perhaps. Yeah. So this is just the introduction. My institution. I'm from the CEO from the Indonesia Environment Fund. So Indonesia Environment Fund is a public service agency. So we are the government operator, and we was created very young, established since 2019, and we created from the environmental issue, cross-cutting issue, and also mutually integrated, intersection connected, and also manage various sector under the Environment Fund, such as energy, forestry, transportation, environmental services, agriculture, and also other sector. We run our businesses consists of collection, distribution, and also development of fund. And this is our portfolio. We also manage many results-based payment and also results-based contribution. We have many donors, especially from World Bank, like Tao mentioned. We manage forest carbon partnership facility from World Bank and also biocarbon facility. And then the new proposed with Treasury from World Bank that we will manage coral bond. Yeah. So Treasury World Bank will issue coral bond and convert the payment for coupon for convert to become grant and distribute to Indonesia and managed by Indonesia Environment Fund, and we distribute to certain beneficiary. So this is another type of outcome-based financing. And we also have another mechanism, we call it catalytic funding for Indonesia Impact Fund. This is quite important and also quite unique because through the catalytic funding for Indonesia Impact Fund, like milestone-based grant aiming to accelerate private sector with the largest scale solution related with the ESG impact contribution to the government of Indonesia targeted distribution to the investee. So this is the instrument objective seeking the catalytic to accelerate the impact and mechanism based on the milestone incentive. Investee achieve agreed the upon target of impact indicator like low income population, rural region, marginalized community, vulnerable group, and also other suggested activity. And we divided the distribution based on the KPI, key performance indicator. We distributed through 3 tranches. The first tranche is regarding on the approved proposal submission, and the second tranche is related in the output level milestone indicator, and also the last tranche is we also integrated with the donor UNDP and also limited partner, collaborate with the Mandiri Capital Investment. This is like the state-owned enterprise, and we selected 4 startup businesses. One operate under the education technology and also plastic biodegradable, call it Green Hope, and also aquaculture. And we related our program with several ESG and also SDG milestone. Goal 1, no poverty, goal 2, goal 4, and also other important under SDG target. And then we setting the KPI and indicator, and after they submit the proposal, we send to the independent assessor, and after the independent assessor giving the permission, and they ask me to distribute a fund through 3 different tranches. And then from the end of this process, we develop what we call impact report and also impact assessment. And this is quite interesting because if we look from the selected startup businesses, we just to reinforce what Ellen already mentioned, because if we look from Indonesian side, we realize that the plastic waste is one of biggest challenge for developing country and especially for Indonesia. That's why from the government side, we also propose innovative financial scheme through the Indonesia Environment Fund. Besides we collecting international money, we also create from the domestic. We invite blended finance from the private sector as well as from the international organization. And then we create we supported a startup and also small medium enterprise or social enterprise. And through this mechanism, hopefully, we can reduce the impact from plastic waste and also increase the awareness and also negative impact for the plastic waste through the environment. So this is my last presentation, Sarah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and the way that outcome-based financing is already used in Indonesia. I will try and be very brief in closing that that webinar due to the time that is pressing already. Thank you for the questions that you have put into the chat. We haven't had a chance to address them, but we will definitely make the effort of responding to them and sharing them openly. I want to thank so much all of the speakers and their organizations for having joined us today, for having supported during the reports writing. I also want to give a special thank to our scientific committee, Irene Hofmeyer, Anna Kunina, Saji, Linda Spahan, Anna Brockhaus, and Emily Davenport, who have been instrumental in also making this report a reality. And a special thanks to my team, especially Charlotte and Melissa, who are here and have contributed to writing this report and making it a reality. So now, just to conclude really quickly, we see that transitioning to outcome-based financial mechanism for waste prevention is not just a necessity, it's really urgent. We have heard it today also through collaboration, through innovation, through a focus on measurable outcomes. We can really drive system change towards a future that is free of plastic pollution. So thank you so much for joining us on this critical journey. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We also look forward to hearing from you. Don't hesitate to reach out because it's really just the beginning. And for all of those who will be at the INC negotiations in Ottawa, I really look forward to engaging with you there. So thank you again, everyone, and to be followed up really soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.